The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
More than 42 years after his most famous moment, Elia has passed away at the age of 87. We will go through that famous moment in great detail coming up. Also, there's a story brewing about the NFL and the NFL Players Association, which may be stomped down by the owners and their money, but it is a bombshell. And it is something that could cost a number of people their jobs, including the commissioner of the NFL. We will get to that. Celebrity Day yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show as he is at that tournament that's going on in Lake Tahoe. So he talked to Matt Ryan and he talked to Grant Hill. We'll play some of that. Dawn Staley on the Glue Guys podcast on coaching. And yes, my voice is still a problem today. So we will power through this and hopefully rest up through the weekend and be ready to go on Monday. But bear with me today because there's some interesting stories to talk about. I'm not going to do what the national radio people like to do at this time of year where they go, hey, who's the best quarterback in the NFL? Give us a call. Hey, what's the best storyline in the NFL? Call us. You know, hey, no, that's not what we do here. I like to delve into stories, and we got a big one here that I think has a chance to really go somewhere, assuming, and they usually do, assuming the Players Association doesn't cave. Now, the NFL owners know they can out-litigate them, they can intimidate them, and they could make them go away. That's always going to be in play. But it is interesting to look at what has unfolded here in a very short period of time. Now, this goes back to last January, so it's more than 6 months ago. And there was a suit that was filed by the Players Association alleging collusion by the owners to put the clamps on guaranteed contracts. And there's even a text exchange between Michael Bidwell, who is the owner of the Arizona Cardinals, and Dean Spanos, who owns the Chargers. And Bidwell had signed Kyler Murray to a contract that included a lot of incentives, but it didn't include guaranteed money. Some guaranteed money, but not all guaranteed money. And that's the big thing that they fear. Whereas Spanos hadn't signed his guy yet because Justin Herbert was still a year away from being eligible to sign a contract extension. But in this text exchange, they clearly are having a conversation about the idea that Bidwell did a great job of not giving guaranteed money or of totally guaranteed money to Kyler Murray, therefore making it a lot easier for Spanos to do his negotiations with Justin Herbert. And there was an arbitrator who looked at this, and he said, yeah, there's evidence here that this happened, but we don't think there's enough evidence, so the suit was thrown out. Well, there was no appeal by the Players Association, none. And it got kind of buried. Nobody said anything about it. You know, if you got evidence that something happened, don't you want to take this as far as you can go? Excuse me. They did not. And there are a variety of reasons for that, including the fact that J.C. Tretter, who was or is now the Players Association president, he didn't want to push it forward because in this suit, there was conversation where he was heard ripping Russell Wilson for accepting a contract that didn't have guaranteed money. So they didn't want that to get out. There's also the Lloyd Howell situation. Lloyd Howell is the executive director of the NFL Players Association. He replaced DeMaurice Smith. Lloyd Howell works with an investment firm that is working to invest in a team. He's working for the players, and he's looking to become management. You can't have that. Not good. So they didn't want all that to get out. So all this gets buried. And Pablo Torre, who does this podcast, Pablo Torre finds out, he got the 61-page document, which showed, in fact, there was evidence of collusion between the owners to make sure that no more fully guaranteed contracts went out. Now the Players Association, some of the players are going, whoa, I never saw that document. I never saw that. Wait a minute. What are you saying? So now there's been an appeal filed by the union 6 months later, and the owners have said, okay, file your appeal, but if you lose, that's going to cost you $12 million in legal fees, trying to scare them off. Torrey yesterday was on the Dan Le Batard show, and this is how he explained what he thinks the players can do here and what they should be doing.
Frankly, if you're a player who signed a new deal in 2021 when all this stuff was happening, it's about the offseason of 2021, where guys getting guarantees. The answer, turns out, was no. Full guarantees. No one got them. They should be contemplating what is our legal recourse. I've talked to lawyers now who are wondering, when is the next shoe to drop going to be a lawsuit? When will... I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself here because we're still reporting the story.
Justin Herbert could sue the league, could sue the union, could he not?
Justin Herbert, who was named in the text exchange between Michael Bidwill and Dean Spanos, the owner of the Chargers, Bidwill, the Cardinals owner, in which they are basically celebrating how they didn't give Kyler Murray full guarantees, which then helps Dean Spanos and the Chargers to not give Justin Herbert the full guarantees. I would imagine that guy logically would have a bone to pick, especially Dan. The extra layer of crazy on all of this is that those players that we've been naming, and this is Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and Justin Herbert, the four big stars named in this thing, they were never told or shown what was in the document that was about their livelihoods until I published it. They had never heard it. The union had never told them. They had never shown them. And so there is actively, I think, a would-be grievance if they choose to pursue it. But also, clearly, the union is behind the scenes on fire right now in every figurative sense. And I think everyone's running around trying to cover their own ass.
Yeah, no question about that, because the Players Association has something to go forward here. If nothing else, they let the public know. Do you realize what the owners are doing here? If you go back, it's 40 years ago, but Peter Ueberroth became the commissioner of baseball in 1985 after having great success running the Los Angeles Olympics in 1984. He replaced Bowie Kuhn, who was sort of a fossil, you know. Kuhn ran things differently. He's the one that during his watch, free agency came in, and he handled it poorly. So Ueberroth, the young guy, was going to take baseball into the next generation as free agency was going on. But owners were kvetching about the fact that they were overpaying these players. So Ueberroth says to them, well, why don't you guys get together and decide you're not going to pay these salaries? And in fact, in the offseason of 1987, that's what they did. And Andre Dawson, who was a three-time All-Star, was a free agent. He had bad knees. He wanted to leave Montreal, which had artificial turf, and he wanted to sign with the Chicago Cubs, but the Cubs weren't offering him any money. Nobody was offering him money. He wound up giving the Cubs a blank contract, signed for $500,000, and became the MVP of baseball. And as the investigation unfolded, they found out, yeah, in fact, Ueberroth said to the owners, stop paying these guys money. That is collusion. You have stopped the competitive process by doing that. That's illegal. And in fact, the players were granted damages from this. It's a quaint number now, but 40 years ago it was significant money. They got $200 million in restitution on that, and Ueberroth was fired. Pablo Torre is saying that with everything they've got right now, it's possible that Roger Goodell's out the door.
The 8 owners who were named in this and others, one might presume, I would be calling for Roger Goodell's job. Now, will that happen in real time? I doubt that, but that is actively what the leverage that the union might have had here is. They could have gone to Capitol Hill. They could have called for hearings. They could have made an enormous public display of look at what we're dealing with heading into our next CBA, is that the leadership of the NFL itself is doing this stuff. And so I'm not predicting, I'm merely saying that this is actually concretely in the document part of the conversation.
Will it lead to that, the ouster of Roger Goodell? Hard to say. I mean, he's got 1 year left on his contract. He is 66 years old, but he's a workout fanatic. And who wouldn't want to continue to make $60 million a year or whatever he makes? And he's the most powerful person in sports. He's not going to easily walk away from that. And the owners want him because he's printing money. But Tori's right. You go before Capitol Hill, this is a terrible look. This is a league that is just spewing money. They decided last year, Christmas Day is on a Wednesday. That's okay. We'll just put a couple of games on, sell it to Netflix for $100 million. And the TV deal, which brings in over $1 billion a year, is going to go probably double once they reopen it in 2029. So with the league as a geyser of money, getting wet with dollar bills falling all over them and screwing the players, it's not a good look. Now, generally, the union caves on this because players' careers are short in the NFL. The average career is like 3.5 years, and nobody wants to blow a year in a strike or some kind of labor stoppage. They could also be locked out. So they generally fall into line here. If you go back to 2011, when we had the last lockout, you had players borrowing money at 20% interest and millions of dollars. It was crazy. So they know what they're dealing with here. Tom Lavero calls them a motorcycle gang, which is pretty much what they are. But again, you have to realize everything that's going on here. It's not just evidence of collusion by the owners. It's the Players Association side, which decided that they wanted to bury this, not let it out to the rank and file, which is their job to keep the rank and file informed. They wanted to keep this under wraps because there were some embarrassing things in there, including the executive director having a conflict of interest, working with an investment firm that's trying to get a team. And you have J.C. Treader, who clearly wants to be the head of the union, who's at some point realizing, we can get Lloyd Howell out of there, and I'm going to be in charge. And you have him documented ripping a player for taking a contract that wasn't fully guaranteed. So it's a mess. It is a mess. And I would think that the NFL owners will ultimately prevail, as they always do. But it does open up a box in which we can all look inside and go, ooh, wow, see how that sausage is being made. Speaking of my buddy Lavero, he's got a column today. I'm sure you've heard chatter about this. There are only 3 open practices for the Commanders when they get started. They've got the rookies coming in just about a week. I think it's a week from today, and then the veterans come in on the 22nd. There are only 3 open practices the entire time they're in Ashburn. 27th of July, 29th, August 2nd. And then they have season ticket holder events 28th and 31st of July and August the 4th. And what Tom points out here is, for a team that's trying to drum up public support for a stadium that cost almost $4 billion, why would you want to do this? He says the Giants have 11 open practices. The Cowboys, who practice all the way in California, have 15 open practices. It's an interesting response that he got when he asked the Commanders why there aren't more open practices. And he said the response was, we're excited to host training camp at the Ortho, Virginia training camp in Ashburn again this summer as we prepare for the 2025 season. We are pleased to once again offer our fans, including season ticket holders, the opportunity to see the team practice for the summer, along with hosting a day for the military. We also look forward to those attending training camp and our joint practice with New England. Well, that's at New England, so I don't know about that. But here's the rub here. I didn't know this. He says that Dan Quinn is worried about spies, that people will show up and take video with their iPhones, which gives you great clarity these days, and he's afraid that it'll wind up in the hands of the Dallas Cowboys. Tom says, I've been told the technology of handheld videos has become so good, NFL scouts often go through fan websites looking for video nuggets that would give the team a competitive advantage, that the Commanders do this as well. So this goes back to George Allen. George Allen, who was always afraid of spies, had a former, I don't think he was FBI, but he was some kind of security person, and he was known as Ed 00 Boynton. And he used to ride his bicycle around the outside of training camp to make sure there were no spies. And on top of that, the Cowboys, who used to practice on a field that was over or had been overlooked by a hotel, the Cowboys would have to buy out the entire side of the hotel the week before they would play the Redskins for fear that there would be scouts there looking at what was going on. So, Dan Quinn doesn't come off as that kind of guy, but hey, any competitive advantage you can get So maybe it's understandable. But that apparently is the reason that they're having so few of them that are open to the public. Total of 6, and 3 of them are for season ticket holders. So I guess they could confiscate cell phones when you come in. I guess that's possible. But people like to take pictures and get selfies with the players and stuff like that. So I don't think you can really do that. But, wow, that's something. All right. Lee Elia has passed away at the age of 87. His most famous moment, 42 years ago, when he unleashed maybe the most famous rant in the history of sports. We'll get to the backstory of that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, you're going to have to bear with me today. My voice is, it is what it is. I picked up something on the plane ride back from Seattle over the weekend, and I don't feel any pain or anything, but the voice is struggling a little bit, drinking some tea, and hoping to roll through on this. So Lee Elia has passed away at the age of 87. And Lee Elia spent over 50 years in baseball, but would probably be a somewhat forgotten figure. He coached with a bunch of teams. He had kind of a cup of coffee as a player with the White Sox and the Cubs, played less than 100 games for the two teams back in the 60s, and, would be considered a baseball lifer. He had 2 stints as a manager, both of them less than 2 years with the Cubs and the Phillies. But he had a moment in baseball history that is among the most incredible and would have been completely forgotten were it not the tape recording of Les Grobstein, who died a couple of years ago. He was a Chicago radio guy, and he was a tireless Chicago radio guy. He was at everything. And this actually happened to be a Friday afternoon game at Wrigley Field. And it was against the Dodgers, some Dodgers marquee team in 1983. But, it's Friday afternoon, and generally in the radio business, you don't go out of your way to cover those because the following day, the big part of radio is morning drive. It's Saturday, and some stations even then didn't do sportscasts in the morning. But Les was there. And it was early in the season. It was in April. They had played only 19 games, so it was April 29th, 1983, and the Cubs dropped to 5-14 with a 4-3 loss. There were only 9,300 people there, but they made their presence known and their anger known at the Dodgers by throwing garbage on players such as Keith Moreland and Larry Boa as they went to the clubhouse. So it was, kind of an ugly scene after the game, or ugly scene during the game. And after the game, Lee Elia was primed to go. So as Grobstein recounted some years ago on a podcast, things got a little nuts once the clubhouse doors opened up.
The only reporters that were in there were myself and the 3 beat writers, Joel Bierig, the late Robert Marcus, and Don Frisky, who's still an official scorer for the Cubs and the Sox. So we're in there, and I walk in with the 3. Everybody else went to the Dodgers side, including you, because Mike Marshall, who's from Buffalo Grove High School, my son's alma mater, by the way, everybody wanted to talk to Mike Marshall. This was the first game the Chicago native had ever played in Wrigley Field, and he had hit a home run. Everybody's in there talking to Marshall. We're in there talking to Elia. We walk in. Elia's got a big smile on his face. "Hi, fellas, how you doing?" And I said, that's another awful way to lose a game. He smiled, nodded his head yes, and that's when he started. We're mired now in a little difficulty.
Mm-hmm. And here we go. So this was part 1 of Lee Elia talking into the microphone of Les Grobstein.
We're mired now in a little difficulty. We got all these so-called fans that come out here and say they're Cub fans that are supposed to be behind you, ripping every thing you do. I'll tell you one thing. I hope we get hotter than just to stuff it up than 3,000 people that show up every day. Because if they're the real Chicago fans, they can kiss my right downtown and print it. What the am I supposed to do? Go out there and let my players get destroyed every day and be quiet about it? For the nickel-dime people that show up? The motherfuckers don't even work. That's why they're out of the game. They want to go out and get a job and find out what it's like to go out there and a living. 85% of the world's working. The other 15 come out here. The playground for the rip them cutting like the players. Got guys busting their ass, and them people do. And that's the Cubs? My the great support that the players get around here. I haven't seen it this year. Don't ask me about any specific play. I won't answer it. I'm not going to talk about specific plays. The name of the game is hit the ball, catch the ball, and get the job done. Every time we lose a close game, it's magnified. Why did this guy bunt it and that guy pop up or this guy throw a wild pitch? That's baseball, fellas. That's going to happen. That's how runs are scored. That's how the balance goes cockeyed. That's the difference between victory and defeat. Right now, we have more losses than we have wins. Everybody associated with this organization have been winners their whole life. Everybody. And the credit is not given in that respect. The changes that have happened in the Cub organization are multifold. All right, they don't show because we're 5-14. And unfortunately, that's the criteria of them dumb 15% to come out to date baseball. The other 85% are earning a living. I'll tell you, it'll take more than a 5-13 or 5-14 to destroy the makeup of this club.
So that would seem to be it, right? And that was a mouthful. And that line that he has there, 85% of the world is working, and the other 15% come out to boo us. That's an all-timer. And remember, in those days, the Cubs had no lights. So all their games at home were played in the afternoon. And what he's saying is, yeah, if you had a job, you wouldn't be out here at Wrigley Field booing us. So that might have been enough, like Diano. But as Les Grobstein explained,
get done with that whole thing. And I said to Elia, we knew he was burying himself, and we all liked him. We all got along great with him. I said, see you tomorrow. And we knew that they were going to go up against the Dodgers one more time, and Fernando Valenzuela was going to pitch. And by the way, the Cubs clobbered him the next day. So Elia looks at me, goes, okay, no problem. He has a smile on his face. And I started to walk out. You were there. Pat Benkowski was there. Rich King was there. And I started to walk out, and Elia started up again.
Yep, so here was part two.
I guarantee you that. There's some pros out there that want to play this game. But you're in a stigma of the Dodgers and the Phillies and the Cardinals and all that cheap. All these mother editorials about Say and the Phillyitis and all that. It's sickening. It's unbelievable. It really is. It's a disheartening situation we're in right now. Anybody that was associated with the Cub organization 4 or 5 years ago that came back and sees the multitude of progress that's been made will understand that if they're baseball people, then 5-14 doesn't negate all that work. Got 143 games left. What I'm trying to say is don't rip them guys out there. Rip me. If you want to rip somebody, rip my ass. But don't rip them guys, because they're giving everything they can give. And right now they're trying to do more than God gave them, and that's why we make the simple mistakes. That's exactly why. But once we hit that groove, it'll flow. And it will flow. The talent's there. I don't know how to make it any clearer to you. I'm frustrated. I'll guarantee I'm frustrated. It'd be different if I walked in this room every day at 8:30 and saw a bunch of guys that didn't give a shit. They give a shit.
The word count, 448. They calculated that 39 of those words were naughty. In other words, one in every 11. He used 4-letter words, 10-letter words, 12-letter words. He dropped 33 of the phrases that have become known as F-bombs, mostly with the suffix ing shortened to in. So Les Grobstein has this tape. There were print reporters in there, but even though they would, certainly use those quotes, it doesn't do it justice until you hear the actual recording of what was said by Lee Elia on that date in 1983. So now Les knows what he has. He's got the tape, and he's got to let other people hear this. I mean, the guys who were in the locker room with him, they were writers, so there were a handful of other writers in there, but he had the actual tape, and this is the story of what happened next. Dallas would be Dallas Green, who is the general manager of the Cubs.
I walk out into the left field corner, and another guy that I worked with, because I worked for the AP and did a lot of work, but was Joe Muschel. And he looks at me. I go, "You've got to hear this, Joe. You're going to be. You can't miss this." And he looks at me. and goes, "What are you doing, you silly sucker?" And if he called you that, you knew that he liked you.
It was a term of endearment.
Yeah, very much a term of endearment. So I played it for him. He turned white as a ghost. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. All those guys had cigars, and he had a big cigar in his mouth. He goes, "Oh, my God, I got to get in there." I said, "I'll let you hear the whole thing." He says, "I'll see you upstairs." So I walked out of there. I'm going up into the old press box, which is now the suite level at Wrigley Field. And as I'm walking in, what three men come out of there? Harry Carey, Vince Lloyd, and Lou Boudreau, all three of which are no longer, sadly, around today. I said, "Guys, I know this is a Friday night. You probably have dinner reservation. You've got to hear this." And I played it. And Vince Lloyd had a cigar the size of a tree trunk in his mouth, and it starts spinning around like Popeye the Sailor Man's pipe in his mouth. He couldn't believe what and Harry Carey, "What the hell is this son of a going to be? What did he do?" Whatever. And Lou Boudreau, "This is true, good kid." I played it for them, and then they got the hell out of there. Later on, Bob Eibach comes up to me and says, "I need a favor from you." And Bob and I, to this day, we get along just fine. I said, "What do you need?" He says, "I need your tape." I go, "What are you going to do, play it for Dallas?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "I'm not getting the guy fired." And Don Frisky turns to me and says, "Why don't you give him the tape? If not anything else, they could get the guy up here to apologize or in the press room, and maybe it'll save his job." Turned out that was true. Here's another hidden story there. Dallas Green heard my tape, played for him by Bob Eibach, and he had a fit. And you know how Dallas can have a conniption fit all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So he calls Elia's office, no answer, because he wanted to get him up there to get him with the rest of the media and try to. And first of all, Elia didn't even realize what he said. So things continue, and they dialed him again. Turned out Elia had left his car keys in his office. And remember, there was no cell phones in those days. This was 1983. No cell phones. There was no other items. There was no internet. None of that stuff even existed. Elia went up there to get his car keys. He answers the phone. Green says, "Get your bleep up here now." He goes, "Well, I have to go umpire my daughter's softball game over here at Lincoln Park." He says, "Okay, you go ahead and do that. And if you do, clean out your locker because then you're fired." And he got up there. Elia played him. I got the tape played for him by Dallas Green. And that's when they called all the media that weren't even at the game. I mean, nobody from the flagship station GN was out there that night. They were down the street on Bradley Place down Addison. And Chuck Swirsky, who, he works for at the Score today doing the Bulls games. And Chuck all of a sudden got in his car and made a beeline over there. And other reporters, the only TV guy at the start was Gian Greco. Now all of a sudden everybody's there. And Elia says, "Hey, I didn't mean this for all the fans, blah, blah, blah." And he did apologize. And it was unbelievable. For a short time after that, Elia was kind of pissed at me. But eventually he said to me, "Look, it's not your fault. You were doing your job." He says, "I can't be mad." And to this day, Elia and I are fine.
Yeah, well, they're friends, and as a matter of fact, they, on the 25th anniversary, I believe, released a special edition of the tape, and I don't know, how much money they made off of that, but it was something of a venture that they got into off what was just a bizarre moment in baseball. Now, Elia didn't keep his job even for the rest of the season. He was fired in late August, and the team that played the next year under Jim Fry actually almost got to the World Series. They took, and I think they had a 2-0 lead in the series, they took San Diego to the limit in the NLCS. San Diego went to the World Series and lost. They lost to the Tigers, who went wire to wire in the American League. But that team, the nucleus of that team in '83 that came back in '84, was huge in winning the Western Division or winning the I guess it was the East, whatever it was. They had the record that allowed them to play San Diego in the playoffs. They had Ryan Sandberg, Jody Davis, Leon Durham, Mel Hall, Lee Smith, who was a great closer, Hall of Fame closer. They would add Rick Sutcliffe from the Dodgers, Dennis Eckersley, and Gary Matthews from the Phillies, and that team went on to almost get to the World Series. And you think of what happened in April of 1983 and how Lee Elia's legacy, his total 50 years in baseball, it's tied to about a 3.5-minute rant that he did in the clubhouse after the Cubs lost to the Dodgers in what was a routine Friday afternoon game in front of 9,300 people. But the fact that Les Grobstein had his tape recorder there and had that just, makes that live on. Because, again, if there's no tape, there's just a few quotes. And really, that's about it. One of the more interesting what-if stories in sports is, what if the Atlanta Falcons in January of 2017 didn't blow that 28-3 lead against New England in the Super Bowl in Houston? And what if the Atlanta Falcons held on? And what if Dan Quinn was still the coach of the Atlanta Falcons right now? I mean, is it possible he'd be having a John Harbaugh type of run there? I mean, it's entirely possible, and he wouldn't be the coach here. And Matt Ryan, we would say, would be a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame. Wouldn't you think so? Because he's already been an MVP in the NFL, 4-time Pro Bowler, threw for 381 touchdowns, 183 interceptions. But he's now considered to be a bubble guy. I think he helps himself by being on television, which in my mind is kind of a sad fact, because I think that's what's helped to prevent Joe Jacoby from getting in, that, out of sight, out of mind. So Matt Ryan may get in, and quarterbacks, who have those kind of numbers and a former MVP would certainly get consideration for that. But he is one of those bubble guys. But he's pretty glib, and I think he's pretty good on television. Looks good, handsome young man. So he was on with Dan Patrick yesterday. Dan's been doing his show out in Lake Tahoe, where they got that celebrity tournament going on that they hold every year. These are shows that are really fun to do. I've done a bunch of these over the years. The Redskins, I guess now the Commanders, they used to hold maybe still do a golf tournament out on the Eastern Shore, and they used to bring by a bunch of players to talk to us. In fact, I'll give you a quick story. I was out there with Tom Lavero some years ago, and we were doing the afternoon show. And they were bringing by some known people, some known players we knew, like Joe Jacoby, and I think it was George Stark was there, I think. And there were a few others. Maybe Theismann showed up. And then Mark Rippon would always come on with us because he hosted the tournament, and it was for families who had lost a child. He and his wife very tragically lost a son to a brain tumor when I think he was only about 4 years old. So just an awful thing. But they try to provide support for families who've gone through tragedies like that. But anyway, we see this guy in the distance. We're in a commercial break, and we see a guy who clearly looks like he's a former defensive lineman. He's easily 300 pounds now. And he's got a hat on his head, and he gives us a wave. So we think, pretty good chance he's a former Redskin, because this is what the tournament is for. And we wave him over, and he comes over, and he shakes our hand. He says, "Hi, Jay Schrader." And we're thinking, oh, man, okay, yeah. So, not only had his body shape changed, but his image had changed, because things were not good when he left. If you remember this, he had a spectacular year in 1986, the year after Joe Theismann broke his leg. He threw for 4,000 yards. They got to the NFC Championship game. But in 87, he had that year where he was back and forth for the bench with Doug Williams, and Doug Williams ultimately was the quarterback in the playoffs, and he was the quarterback who won the Super Bowl. And the following year, Schrader got demoted to third string, and eventually Bobby Beathard, in another masterful trade, sent him to the Raiders for Jim Lachey, who was a key piece of their final Super Bowl team after the 91 season. But it was good to talk to Jay Schrader. He was very affable and talked a lot about baseball. He was the number 3 pick of the draft. He had gone to UCLA to play quarterback and had cemented the job. He was the starting quarterback in a bowl game, but he'd made the decision that he was going to try and play baseball. And he went to play for the Blue Jays minor league team, and he said that he knew baseball wasn't going to be for him. He was playing, I think, catcher and third base. And he said, facing Dwight Gooden and the slider at twilight, I knew I couldn't do that. So he came back to football, and actually the Raiders were interested in signing him then, but Beathard took him. I think it was a supplemental draft or something. But anyway, he wound here as like a fourth-round pick, sat for a year, and then Theismann got hurt in 85, and he took over and then was the quarterback in 86. Anyway, Matt Ryan, playing in this tournament, now retired from the NFL. He played 14 years in Atlanta and 1 in Indianapolis before he retired, and now he's doing TV. Along with his great career numbers, he was also sacked 488 times. And in talking to Dan, he was asked to give his most memorable sack.
One sack that stands out? I mean, they all kind of run together when you get about 500 of them. But I'd say the sack fumble in the Super Bowl is probably the one that.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't going there.
Listen, I think sometimes you got to get in front of it, right?
Okay,
if you're the guy, you just got to go and get in front of it. So if you're asking me about one of them, Dan, I would probably say that's the one I would like to have not been sacked on. But anyhow, what else do you guys want to talk about? The college football playoff?
What was that play called? So you're in the huddle and you call that play. What is it?
It's a good question. I don't remember the exact play call offhand. I'm always amazed some of these guys that can rip back from, just off the cuff.
Oh, your guys' memories have to be great.
It's really good. I remember the situation. I remember what the route we had going on. We had Aldrick Robinson running the corner that was coming out like the top of this, and he was going to be open. Like he was going to be open and trying to hang on for that extra second, give him a chance to make a play. But
would that have been a touchdown?
It would have been a chunk. I think there was a chance, but it would have been a chunk play for sure.
But you don't remember the call?
But I can't remember. It was a designer, what we call designer calls. So it was like a specific play for that week, for that situation. So it wasn't like, gun trips right, 3-jet jaws, X drift, which was one of our staple plays. It was a designer play for that week.
Give us a call, though, that might surprise us, the depth of it that you're trying to absorb if you're, a wide receiver, running back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of staple plays, but like where it gets wordy is in the run game, then canning or killing or checking or whatever you want to a pass play. So, we'd have like West right, Zoomsy right, 19 Wanda force, can gun, 3 scat, X hole spacing.
That's one play.
And so, I heard you read the little script coming on here. That was more impressive to me than calling a play. Right now that I've done TV and I've seen the prompter and having to come in and done some of those things, I find that far more difficult than regurgitating a play call.
No. Reading a piece of promo copy is nothing compared to those plays. It's not that just you spew out all those words to call the play, but each word or color or number means something to a different player. Football, it seems like a game that's played by big, fast guys and big, dumb guys. No, these are all smart guys. I think I said this yesterday. A lot of guys get shuffled out of the NFL, not because they're not physically talented enough to play in the NFL. It's because they can't handle the mental part. And I think he just demonstrated there how tough it is. Second part for Matt Ryan, who did play 15 years in the NFL, played for only 2 teams. Now you got Kirk Cousins on his third, and there may be a fourth, depending on how things shake out. But Ryan was asked about this Cousins situation where he's guaranteed $100 million, and he comes in, signs it, and then they go ahead and draft Michael Penix early in the first round. Like, hey, what's going on here? And now Cousins is the backup. He didn't sign in Atlanta to be the backup. And they're not going to trade him because they got to pay him all this money anyway, so they might as well keep him around as a backup to Penix. Here's Ryan on the conundrum that is facing Kirk Cousins.
Listen, I get both sides of it, right? I get the frustration from Kirk's end, right? You would hope for transparency coming into a situation of what the plan is moving forward. Hey, why are you bringing me in? Is there, what kind of runway are we looking at here with myself? I think from the Falcons' perspective, that was such a deep draft at quarterback, and I think that as I've been removed as a player, my player side of me goes right to Kirk. Of course, I'd be pissed too, right? You know, you're in that situation. I think that's a natural competitor's reaction. Like, what are we doing? We've got other spots we could go. You've heard other quarterbacks say that in buildings where they've been established and they're drafting young quarterbacks, saying, what are we doing? We can add value at different spots. So I think Kirk coming in feeling like he had a 4 or 5 year runway to play there, and then them going in a different direction was probably is difficult for him. But I get the organization standpoint, because I do think, you know, when you look at last year's draft, the depth of that quarterback position, and then projecting forward, right, what the next 2 or 3 drafts are going to look like, and hoping that you're not in a position to draft early, it's the position you've got to take care of. And if you're defending the Falcons, which, you know, I'm biased because I'm played there so long and root for them and all those kind of things, you have to get that position right? And you have to get it right. And when you've got the opportunity to acquire somebody who I think is really talented, I think Michael Penix has a lot of talent, and I think he played really well at the end of the year, you got to do it.
But how did the Niners miss on Trey Lance? How does that happen?
Well, they're not the only ones who have missed on quarterbacks high up there,
but that's
right?
when you trade up and you whiff on a guy.
Yeah, it's...
And I just thought he didn't have enough starts. I needed a larger sample size.
Well, you know, you go specifically to a Michael Penix. I think one of the things you look at when you draft a guy like that is, yes, there were injury concerns and knee and those kind of things, but there was a large body of work.
Indiana and Washington, yeah.
Right? And I remember the old Bill Parcells, you know, the checklist for drafting quarterbacks was 3-year starters and all of this and, you know, whatever the checklist was. But it was, he wanted a sample size. And I think that's gotten increasingly more difficult. You guys were talking about the college football playoff coming in, but the portal, people moving around, people getting out of there more and more. I think it's hard to get a big sample size of quarterbacks at this point.
Well, wait a minute. Dan should have challenged him on that because he just contradicted himself. We have all these quarterbacks who have been successful, including Jaden Daniels here and Caleb Williams. Yeah, I mean, he struggled record-wise with Chicago, but it looks like he's going to be a good quarterback. I mean, the quarterback class was good from this last year, and these are guys who have been, in some cases, at 3 different schools. Penix one of them. And what he's saying, you know, it's harder now to get a sample size. No, it's easier now to get a sample size. It's easier to do that because you have all those starts. And what Parcells said is, I wouldn't take a quarterback who didn't have 23 college starts. And the reason he came up with that number is that back in those days, they used to play only 11 games. So it meant that you had to start 2 full seasons and at least a game in another one. And what we have now is kind of a reverse of the way it used to be. And Dwayne Haskins, I think, suffered from this. The late Dwayne Haskins, who came here as the 15th pick and had only been a starter for a year at Ohio State. That probably hurt him. He wasn't prepared. So I would say to Matt Ryan, wait a minute. You just said you got to have a big sample size from college, and it's harder to get them now. No, it's easier to get them now because guys are staying because they're being paid, and they get more starts. You know, so in some cases, you got to build. Jaden Daniels, what do you have? 3 full starting seasons at Arizona State and 2 at LSU. That's a lot of games. All right, coming up in the next hour, much more from the fun and games that Dan Patrick is having, and Dawn Staley with her thoughts on coaching. Stay with us. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. All right, I'm going to call this gut check time. I got 1 hour to go till the weekend. Hopefully, the voice is going to hold up. I have some tape things to play, which is going to help, but got worse during the week. Really did. Wasn't too bad couple days ago, but I don't know, catching up with me. I feel fine. It's not COVID, anything like that, but something I picked up on the plane ride back from Seattle, and it lingers. So got to power through. Got to play hurt in this league, right? You got to figure out a way to summon what it takes to get on the field. Speaking of that, by the way, if you go to commanders.com, they do these pieces from time to time, this historical stuff. I'd actually like to get involved with it. Nobody's asked me to do it, but they've got one out on Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi coached the Redskins, 56 years ago? Wow, 1969 season. And it is a memorable season because They hadn't had a winning season in forever, and they went 7-5-2, and the future looked so bright. But sadly, Vince Lombardi died of cancer before the following season, and he was only 57 years old. All right, a lot of things to launch into. Grant Hill was on the Dan Patrick Show. We'll get to what he said, a couple of good stories that he told. And I told you I'm a fan of this Glue Guys podcast, which Alex Smith and Shane Battier co-host. Pretty good. They had Dawn Staley on yesterday, so I'm going to play some of that coming up. But this is In the Wind, and it's funny about sports and the number of games played. Years and years ago, prior to the 1961 season, the baseball owners, and this is before television was the main source of revenue, the baseball owners said, we need more games. So they went from 154 to 162. The NCAA tournament, which was light years away from realizing how much money they could get from television, in 1974 was only 25 teams. And there were teams that got bids from winning a conference, and the difference in the ACC was that even if you won the conference, if you had the best record in the conference during the season, there were only, I think, 7 teams in those days, it didn't matter. All you had to do was win the conference tournament. Only the conference tournament winner went to the NCAA. And you probably heard this a million times from me anyway. 74, we had the classic ACC final between NC State and Maryland. NC State winning in overtime, 103-100. They went to the tournament. And Maryland, which may have been the second best team in the country, didn't go. So they expanded to 32. And then they expanded after that to 48. Went to 64 40 years ago. I said, that's it. Perfect. Keep it there. But no, they got to add more, so they went to 68. So it's 68 now. There has been talk that by next year they would go to 72 or 76. That's not happening for right now, but it's in the wind, and people are talking about it. And Tony and Mike kicked it around yesterday or the other day on PTI.
There is persistent talk that the NCAA tournament, both men's and women's, will be expanded beyond the 68 teams that we have now. If such expansion takes place, it will either be to 72 teams or 76 teams. Wilbon, you and I are old enough to remember the 1970s when there were 16 teams in this tournament.
Yeah.
If this expansion happens, how does the logic sit with you?
It doesn't. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to listen to it. I'm not going to boycott the tournament. I'm going to watch the tournament no matter what it does, probably. But, you're leaving this to a body. Up there, that logo that says NCAA, there's not a more worthless brand in sports. There's not a more mistrusted brand in all of sports than the logo that says NCAA. Because the people who rule for that body, they look like clowns much of the time as a body, even if I know and we know people who represent the organization and have wonderful careers. But when they convene and they act in the name of NCAA, they get it wrong more often than not. So they're going to screw this up. It's an iconic event brand, the Final Four, March Madness, the big dance, all of that.
Yep.
And they're not smart enough to leave it alone.
Yeah. The logic in this is very, very simple. There is only one reason for expansion, just one. It is money. It is more money. So the teams that come in at number 69 or number 71 or number 76, it doesn't matter what number they are. They can't win this tournament. They cannot win this tournament. They are in there to gin up television revenue and gin up gate revenue. That's all this is about. They are going to say that there's a fairness issue here, that more conferences will get more teams in, which I don't believe. They're going to say there are 354, I believe 354 D1 teams, and only 20% are represented in the tournament. Look, we see this in all sports. We see extra playoff rounds, extra playoff teams. There's more wild cards in baseball. There's a play-in the NBA. It exists for money. That's why it's there. And if there are 354 D1 teams in basketball, 325 cannot win this. They cannot win this. You're not going to get teams from one big conference. My school, Binghamton, is not getting in if we don't win the conference, right? It's not what's going to happen. You're going to get 6th and 7th place teams from big conferences, and they're never going to win, right? They're never going to win it. Stop.
Then Tony,
let's take a break.
Not only that, they're not going to gin up the gate because nobody's going to go watch.
No, those teams won't.
50 alums are going to watch those teams. What are they doing?
No, I mean, you try progressively to ruin something, and eventually you will. Eventually they'll say everybody gets in.
I'm not sure they can kill it. We've had 68 teams since 2011, so what's that, 14 years. We don't like it necessarily, but most people, I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people ignore the Tuesday and Thursday games, Tuesday and Wednesday games that are played in Dayton. You know, the tournament for most people starts at noon on Thursday. And the bracket, which helped to make this so popular, you know, and when it started with 64, we didn't have the internet, so you had to, you know, fill out the paper ballots at work and everything. Now, CBS Sportsline or whatever you use does it all for you. But that was also very convenient, that you just had your 64. If they go to 72 or 76, you know, so be it. I don't think they can kill it because, you know, once you get down to that Sweet 16, that's the nitty-gritty of the tournament. The games that go on Thursday and Friday, they're fun, but they're on all the time. They're nonstop, and it's fun. It's just a great event. Killing it, I don't think so. Although the numbers have been down, and the women's tournament, Caitlin Clark had a lot to do with it. But a couple of years ago, men's final drew 9 million people on TV. Women's 18 million. So. Keep that in mind. All right, Grant Hill played in NCAA tournaments every year at Duke, won 2 national championships, took his team back to the national championship, losing to Arkansas in his senior year. He was on Dan Patrick's show yesterday, and they talked about the era that Hill played in, you know, Kobe and Jordan and Paul Pierce. And Pierce recently made a statement that he's the greatest scorer in NBA history, to which Grant Hill said this.
That I don't agree with. but I'll say this. Like, I think people need to understand this. Like, to be great, to be a top 10, top 20, like, you have to have a delusional confidence and a delusional belief in who you are and what you can do. And so I said this before. I think we were at the Final Four in Minnesota, and I talked about going against Jordan, and like, you always felt that you were going to win. You have to believe. You have to believe. Like, now we didn't win. We didn't win much at all back in the '90s against the Bulls.
But you thought you were as good as Jordan.
Yes, and that's just part of being a competitor, and you know, there were some moments where I was able to go at them, and there were a few times we beat them. They beat us more times than we beat them. But you have to believe that. You have to believe in yourself. So I don't agree with Paul, but I understand sort of the mindset and where he's coming from.
He's Grant Hill, the Hall of Famer, Managing Director, USA Men's Basketball. What advice would you give Cooper Flagg?
Oh, wow. I think he's in a great spot. First of all, I love Dallas. I love that he's got some good, talented players around him. You know, I went to a 20-win team my rookie year, and 4 years at Duke where it's about winning championships, and now you go into an environment, you just pick up bad habits.
Did you even lose 20 games in your career?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure. That's a great question.
Because the losing.
But what ends up happening is that you start to settle in to losing habits. And so just 1 year in a bad environment, went from 20 wins to 28 my rookie year, big improvement. But then when Doug Collins came in the next year, he changed the culture, and it was painful. But so losing is just tough. So for him to go to a team that has been to the finals, that has playoff expectations. I know Kyrie's out. We don't know if he'll be out all season or not. It's a great environment. Cooper's handled the pressure so well. It's remarkable at a young age how he, last summer we brought him in, and I was a little worried that it might be too much for him. But let's see what happens. Everyone predicted he would be the number one pick this year, and we brought him in with the select team last summer. And day two, he was one of the best players on the court and had no fear. He was going at these guys. Now, I will say, they didn't really know his game, and they didn't have the scouting report on him. So I want to qualify things by saying that. But, hey, just go out there, compete, have fun. The weight of the world's on your shoulders. You got a great coach in Jason, who I think will utilize him, put the ball in his hands, take advantage of his versatility. So I'm excited to see what he can do. But I think if he can, I think he's in a great spot, and he's got a chance to be on a winning team his first year, which is important for a rookie.
Yeah, that's a great point about Cooper Flagg, who made his debut last night in Summer League. Some good, some bad. Usually when you're the number one pick of the draft, you're going to an absolutely terrible team. He's going to a team. Now, they probably won't have Kyrie Irving all of his rookie year, so there's that. But they've got Anthony Davis, and if he can have some kind of health, they should be a competitive team. That's kind of unusual for the number one pick. And, everything we hear about Cooper Flagg is he acquitted himself very well in the camp that Hill is talking about. Hill, if you don't know, is the president of USA Basketball. So there's a really good series on Netflix, if you haven't seen it, about the last Olympics and the role that he played. So that's his analysis. I think it's pretty much spot on there. Another thing from Hill was about being competitive, and Grant Hill never had the killer instinct image. To be as great as he was in the NBA, you had to have it. And if he didn't have all those ankle injuries, and if there wasn't mistreatment by doctors, if it was treated properly, he might have had a career that was on par with Kobe Bryant. That's how good he was. But, he was a kid from the suburbs. He grew up in Reston with wealthy parents. His father, Calvin Hill, was a running back in the NFL, outstanding running back for the Dallas Cowboys, and played for the Redskins and the Browns as well. And his mother was very accomplished, had gone to school with Hillary Clinton. So they lived quite well. And as a matter of fact, Calvin Hill used to take Grant Hill down to Southeast and have him play on the playgrounds to toughen him up. So he didn't have the image of a guy like Jordan who would cut your heart out, or Kobe, same thing. So this is Hill on that, and how he kind of balanced the image that he had with his great ability to play basketball.
Those guys, I think, were assassins. I remember vividly 2012. I'm in Las Vegas, and I'm a free agent my last year. I'm about to be 40 years old. And I went to the USA Basketball practice, and it was a 2012 team getting ready. And the Lakers were sort of recruiting me. I ended up signing with the Clippers. But I was talking to Kobe before practice, and the intensity in his face, and talking about, I'm about to go out here and kill. Like, he was, and I'm thinking, this is the second practice on day two. And like, it was, but he was, that was him. And so, and then you look at Michael, Michael brought that. Michael would manufacture things. But, I didn't go that far, but I still, look, I went out there and, I think if you asked the people who I played against, they would tell you I was coming at them. And I didn't really shoot a lot of jump shots. I'm coming right at you, going at, and that was the mentality. And, I remember my rookie year, we played the Knicks, and I went down. I was going one-on-one with Anthony Bonner, and I get by him, and Oakley fouls me, and I fall down, and and I go to the free throw line and shoot free throws. Next play, I go to the hole. This time Bonner fouls me, but then Oakley fouls me again, and then I fall down, and Oak's like, "I like you. You got heart." And I was like, I just couldn't shoot. So that was like, I had no other option. I had to go in there, But like, I went afterwards, like, I didn't, it was always respectful. I didn't, I know who Oak is, but I wasn't going to back down. And so I felt like I won some respect from him as a rookie, which was hard to do.
Yeah, but you'd never say that Grant Hill had the killer instinct that Jordan and Kobe had. But great player, and what an accomplished guy. My God, now running USA Basketball. I think he's had some investments that have gone very well. He's a wealthy man now, so always good to hear Grant Hill. Anyway, that's about it for my voice. That's it for the week. Fortunately, Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here Monday at 9 a.m.